Hello, I'm Gordon Severance, executive producer in India of Candle in the Dark. And we have here with us today Dr. Carey Moore, who wrote the musical score for Candle in the Dark. Gary, this is a great opportunity for me to ask you a question that most film admirers always ask, and that is, what does a person writing a musical score really do, and how does he go about doing it?
Well, I think, Gordon, he has to get the essence of the characters in the language of music. And in Carey's case, that was very easy to do. He was a very strong, charismatic, dedicated person, and he went through tremendous trials. And the real key to that is to try to take that personality and distill it into musical language. And it was a great privilege and a pleasure. I sat down with the director early on, and he had went through the process called spotting, where you go through, and the director has an idea where he wants emotional underscoring by the score and where he wants music to move it along, whether he wants it to be quiet underneath, and you go through and agree on those spots, and you agree to the exact number of seconds that they need to be. He's already figured that out in terms of the flow of the story, and so then he gives you a copy of the film that is pretty much finally edited the way it's going to be, and then you take that, you play it, listen to it, look at it, and try to feel what kind of rhythms and tempos and the emotional score is going to be like at that point. And then you spend the next however long you've got fleshing that out in terms of reality. You sit down with the piano and the pencil and paper, and you put it down.
I noticed in the beginning of the film there were tragedy developed in his life, and you had a rather somber sounding music in various places, particularly when his son died and he had to bury him. And then toward the end it gets more triumphant. So you vary this, do you?
Right, and the interesting thing, it's interesting and for a lot of reasons, but movie music for a film is very confining in one sense, because you're limited to a few number of themes, but you have to take those themes and make them change according to the action. Sometimes it's sad, you may put it in a minor key. Sometimes it's happy, you may triumphantly play it like a march or a dance or something. Richard Wagner, the great opera composer, invented what they call the leitmotif, and he assigned certain themes to certain characters in his dramas, and when that character would appear on stage, you would hear that theme in the orchestra. So the music begins to be associated with the emotional life of the film, and that's really the joy and the challenge of writing that.
The final scene I remember was on the steps of Serampore College, and it was a triumphant moment for Carey because it culminated about 20 years of a campaign to eliminate sati, the practice in India of burning the widow alive on the funeral pyre of her deceased husband.
Right.
And when Carey first saw that, he declared himself that he would fight a campaign to eliminate that. And through a long and arduous effort, he did succeed in getting the law changed with respect to that. And so it was a triumphant moment on the steps of Serampore College.
The interesting thing is, before that triumphant moment, when they actually show the scenes of sati, where they are performing that immolation on screen, I had to write music to underscore that, first of all, and I took sort of Indian themes, or what sounded to me like Indian themes, and used folk instruments that would be Indian-like in character, and worked that into kind of a demonic sort of dance, really. And then when that happens, that leaves a very powerful impact. And when Carey conquers that and defeats that practice, then the triumph is all the much sweeter.
Yes, it sounded like a band celebrating at the very end. And that was on the steps of Serampore College, which reminds me of the impressions that I had of William Carey when I got over there. I was tremendously impressed with the influence that he has had on education today in India after 200 years. I recall we were filming the scene in Bindle Street where Carey was forced, because of lack of funds, to live in poverty in a very run-down section of Calcutta. And so in order to make that film in this section of Calcutta, we needed to have police assistance on the streets to control the crowds. And so I went to the chief of police, and when he heard that we were making a film on William Carey, he said, "You can have as many policemen as you want." He said, "I wouldn't be able to read or write or speak English," he said, "if it were not for William Carey. I grew up studying the grammar and the dictionary that William Carey translated into Bengali from the English. And so that was very impressive to me. And then I remember later, when I was at headquarters in Calcutta, I received a message from Serampore College, which is 16 miles away. And the student who delivered it interested me. Being a college professor, I was always interested in students. And so I asked him what he was doing. Well, he said he graduated and from not only the college, but from the divinity school, which they have. That school sends out about 100 ministers every year to preach the gospel throughout India. And he said he graduated from that, and now he's working on a master's degree. So I asked him immediately, well, what's your thesis topic? Every master's degree has to have a thesis. So he said, well, my topic is the methodology of William Carey. And I said, well, that's interesting. Is there any methodology that William Carey used in his day that you can still use today? And he said, well, I list 5 things in my thesis. And he said, one of them, for example, is preaching in the streets. Now that I'm ordained, I not only preach on Sunday in church, but I also preach Sunday afternoons in the streets, and I find it most effective. So here, 200 years after this man was in Calcutta, we see his influence just coming up spontaneously from all around that area, and it's indeed remarkable.